Ma'am, step away from the woman and keep your hands visible. That's what my wife Sarah heard while she was tying her shoe in our front yard. She looked up, half confused, half amused, to see two cops gripping their holsters like she'd just walked out of a crime scene. Now keep in mind she's in joggers, a hoodie, and her legally holstered sidearm standing on our own grass. Calm as a breeze. But the moment one officer got on the radio and said, "Suspect is armed, female, possible threat," neighborhood complaint, things got wild real fast. Because when the other officer caught sight of the badge clipped to Sarah's waistband, that panic flipped right back onto them. "Chief Bennett." "Oh my God." "Chief Sarah." "Bennett?" one of them stammered, stepping back like they'd seen a ghost. And across the street in full smug mode was Karen Franklin, our HOA president, holding her dog like a trophy and whispering into her phone like she was narrating a true crime show. Problem was the woman she just reported as an armed maniac. That was the new chief of police. And she just filed a false report, a felony. Thing is, this wasn't some random mix-up. It had been brewing for months, ever since Karen got herself reelected HOA president again, thanks to a low voter turnout and some suspiciously well-timed BBQ bribery. She'd turned our quiet cul-de-sac into her personal fiefdom. Fines flew like confetti. $25 for overgrown grass, $50 for kids' chalk drawings, $100 if your holiday lights lingered past New Year's. But her new obsession, a personal rule banning visible firearms, even in a state where open carry is legal. Sarah's presence made most folks feel safer, especially after the burglaries last fall, but Karen didn't see security. She saw defiance. 2 days before the whole incident, she barged into our yard while Sarah was cleaning her garden tools and barked, "You'll be fined $500 a day for wearing that in public." Sarah didn't flinch. She just looked at her and said, "I'm off duty, I'm within my rights, and the HOA has zero legal ground on this." Karen, of course, scoffed and tossed out some line like, "You should be setting an example, not looking like you're headed to a shootout." Sarah just smiled and replied, "I am setting an example, Karen, one that follows the law instead of making it up." Karen stormed off, spitting over her shoulder, "I'll fix this." And 2 days later, she really thought she did by dialing 911. Now, when the responding officers realized who Sarah was, they practically tripped over themselves, apologizing. "Chief, we had no idea," dispatch said. Armed female HOA president insisted it was urgent. Sarah just nodded. "You were doing your job. Now let me do mine." Karen was still standing there, baffled that her grand drama wasn't going according to script. Sarah walked over, calm as ever, and said, "You filed a false police report about an armed threat." "That's serious." Karen stammered something like, "Well, I didn't know it was you. You weren't in uniform. How was I supposed to know?" Sarah replied, "That's exactly why you don't do this. You put neighbors at risk. You put officers at risk, and now you'll answer for it." That night our doorbell rang. Not just one neighbor, 6, with brownies, pie, and a case of soda. We saw everything they said. "That woman's unhinged. What can we do to help? Sarah's never loved the spotlight, even after her promotion." But now the whole street saw what I'd always known: she's tough, patient, and has no time for bullies. But Karen wasn't done. The next day she sent out a newsletter accusing Sarah of threatening her with a weapon. Said she felt unsafe, that Sarah was divisive. Sarah didn't argue back publicly. She just submitted a formal harassment complaint to the city attorney, along with the body cam footage she wears off duty and a transcript of the 911 call. That same week, city council called her in. Behind closed doors, she laid out everything: unofficial policies, harassment, even anonymous letters warning neighbors not to associate with certain people, all traced back to Karen's HOA mailers. The council was floored. One member said, "I thought the HOA just handled landscaping." Meanwhile, Karen strutted around like she'd won. She called an emergency HOA meeting, tried to cite her own 911 call as evidence to ban visible firearms. But this time people pushed back. Greg, who barely talked, stood up and said, "You lied to the cops about our neighbor, who's also the chief. You endangered us all. You're lucky we're not voting you out tonight." Even her vice president started to back away, whispered something to her mid-meeting that made her freeze. She saw the power shift, and it scared her. But she didn't back down. She started digging, called reporters, tried to leak stories. She didn't know the journalist she contacted had a teenage son Sarah once saved from a house fire. That call didn't go how she hoped. And Sarah focused unbothered. She wasn't planning revenge, she was building a case. Then came the glossy newsletter, restoring safety and decency to our streets. It painted Karen as a frightened citizen who'd narrowly escaped a traumatic encounter with a weapon-wielding stranger. That stranger, of course, was Sarah, though the letter only called her a woman affiliated with law enforcement, like omitting her name made it less libelous. Problem was, a neighbor forwarded that very newsletter to the city council and mayor with a note that said, "This what our HOA dues pay for now." Bad timing for Karen. Sarah was scheduled to speak at the city's public safety meeting. She stood at the podium, no theatrics, just facts. Played a clip from the 911 call. Laid out her rights. Described Karen's lies. The room went still. The mayor asked, "You're saying this call was knowingly made against a law-abiding officer?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. She knew who I was and called anyway." This wasn't fear. This was control dressed up as panic. Things moved fast. The mayor ordered a citywide review of HOA practices. The city attorney launched a legal audit. And Karen's own vice president came clean, said she'd been issuing fines without board approval. Sarah encouraged him to file a statement, and he did. Karen called a special board meeting to flip the narrative. Claimed Sarah was intimidating residents. But this time, nobody bought it. Mrs. Geller, who'd lived there 35 years, stood up and said, "Sarah's helped this community more than you ever have. Karen, all you do is send angry emails." When another man read her newsletter out loud and called it slander, Karen cracked. She accused everyone of staging a mutiny. But the board reminded her a no-confidence vote only needed 10 signatures. She laughed it off, until the vote came in 28 to remove her. 2 to keep, 1 abstained. She stormed out, but the unraveling had just begun. The next morning, Sarah got a call. New evidence had surfaced. HOA documents with Karen's solo signature where there should have been board sign-off. Fines tied to these files had led to actual court disputes. The DA launched a full investigation. Karen, now desperate, took to the neighborhood forum with long, rambling rants blaming Sarah for a witch hunt. But folks had had enough. One person commented, "You called 911 on the police chief for walking outside. Sit down." Another posted a meme with her holding a megaphone labeled HOA hysteria. She even filed a defamation suit against Sarah, claimed emotional distress, intimidation by a public official. Sarah didn't flinch. Her brother Evans, a civil litigator, and said the lawsuit read like a badly written blog post. He handled it and the suit collapsed fast once chat logs surfaced, Karen mocking Sarah, calling her a threat, even saying her badge won't save her, she has to go. The judge dismissed the case within the week. Karen got weirder. She showed up at community events with a megaphone, ranted about drones, got escorted out by marshals, parents moved their kids away. And Sarah, she just kept doing her job. Eventually, Karen's house was repossessed. Turns out she'd been funding some shady security firm. No license, no insurance, just a way to move HOA money into her personal projects. A warrant led to her storage unit. Inside drones, spreadsheets labeled control targets, files on neighbors including kids. Karen had created a homemade surveillance state. She was arrested, charged with fraud, illegal surveillance, falsifying documents, and misuse of public funds. And because she'd served on advisory boards for other HOAs across the state, the federal investigation went wider. She did one last Hail Mary, a podcast interview with some conspiracy host, claimed she was a whistleblower, said the HOA takedown was a deep state operation. But the podcast editor, a former student of Sarah's, he turned over the raw footage. Karen admitted everything on tape. Within 48 hours, she was back in court, this time not walking out. Her downfall triggered real change. HOA laws were rewritten. Transparency became mandatory. Fines had to be publicly logged. Residents finally had a say again. Sarah never asked for credit. She turned down most interviews. She didn't want this to be about Karen. It was about fixing what had been broken. On the 1-year anniversary of it all, the neighborhood threw a quiet block party. No speeches, just music, food, people laughing again. A kid handed Sarah a thank you card and said, "Thanks for proving one person can change things." She smiled, gave him a high five, and went back to her jog the next morning. Same route, same stride, same holstered sidearm. Only now the waves she got weren't out of caution. They were out of respect. And as we sat on the porch that night watching the sun set over a neighborhood finally at peace, she looked at me and said, "You know the best part? It's not that she lost, it's that we all finally got something back. Each other." I just nodded, because yeah, that happened. And thank God it did. So now I'm asking you, where do you stand on it? Was it justice overreach or just the beginning of something bigger? Let me know. I think more people need to talk about what power really means and what happens when someone finally stands up to it.